What's up, propertarians and anarchists, and welcome welcome back to Hardcover Hooligans. My name is Mac, and Danilo, I have a question for you. Do you think that the ending of this book is good?
Yes, I actually do.
Okay.
Do you agree?
Well,
is this going to be our first disagreement?
Well, I don't think it's bad, but I do think, and I don't know if I haven't read these other Hainish books, so this guy Ketho appears in the book as if he's some kind of Marvel character I'm supposed to know.
Wait, the guy in the last chapter?
Yeah.
Oh, he's in other books?
No, is he in the other books?
No, I don't know.
Oh, I was saying he appears, and it feels like me as the reader. I'm supposed to be like, oh, it's Ketho, but I don't know if that's true. It just made me laugh. But
for the people who haven't read the book, there's a guy that just appears in the last chapter, and is very important for 4 pages, yeah. And then the book ends.
And when we get into this stuff, I have a summary here. We'll do quickly, but just general thoughts across the board. Danilo, do you so we split these into 2 parts, obviously. I hope it'd be weird if you're listening to this and haven't listened to the first part of the Dispossessed discussion, but if you have, or if you have not, we were both insanely positive on the first half, and I'm curious, which half of this book do you like better? Because I think accidentally I picked a perfect stopping point last time for the switch in both content, and I think the back half of this book is where I have problems. Not that I think anything's bad, but I do have some questions we'll talk about. So which part of this did you enjoy more?
I think the first part is so good.
Yeah, it really is.
But I think just with every written thing, you hear the term second act problems, where things have to sort of keep happening because you set up all this stuff, but also you still have other stuff to say. So it always sort of, with almost anything, gets in the weeds. And so I sort of think that's what happens. It feels a little more that's just kind of more uneven.
Yeah.
Not saying it's bad, but it's just I think in contrast to the first half. And that could just be part of I think I sort of read the second half pretty quickly, and I think it's supposed to be read pretty quickly. So I don't know if I didn't feel maybe that as strongly as you did, because it's sort of I feel like it sort of moves, and if you sort of follow its momentum, it sort of smooths that out a little bit.
It does, yeah. It does move a lot faster. The second half of this book, so the first half really feels it almost feels, this is going to sound like I don't like this, but it almost reads like an academic paper about philosophical ideology regarding system and modes of government. It feels like arguments for these two sides of government, and then the back half of this book is but there needs to be a conflict and a plot. So
yeah.
That all has to kick in. And that stuff is interesting.
Yeah, it's the word that came to mind was atmospheric almost.
Yeah.
It's sort of you're going time, whatever. And the back half is it's sci-fi book time, bitches.
Yeah, it does feel like that.
Here we go. There's war.
Right.
There's guns.
And that's good and bad, because I think that stuff is interesting, but it does feel sort of this book is what my copy is just under 400 pages, I think. Yeah, 387. And this book covers a really long period of time in our main character's life, but the book is not super long, and so there will be sentences where it says "and months passed." So tension is really building, but for me at least, it does feel like everything sort of culminates and conflicts are resolved just like that, just incredibly quickly, at the snap of a finger. Suddenly this government is, and I know it's not suddenly because it has been happening, but Shevek makes a decision and leaves his original goal behind and starts a new goal. And for me, that felt a little out of nowhere, even though in the fiction of the book it was building, but I don't know, I didn't feel that.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about it, like, because, you know, the scheme of the book is sort of like the alternating chapters, like the odd ones are flashbacks, and the even ones are like the, you know, the present moment on different planets, where it's, I could see a Brandon Sanderson version where he wants to flesh out the plot on Urras, and so adds a bunch of really boring fluff chapters to stick to his scheme.
Right.
So, like, I would almost rather have it feel rushed than have it be
definitely.
like, why are we here?
Yeah, because it's all important, and the Annarres stuff informs all the Urras stuff, but it is always, you're never going to escape. If you're telling a story out of sequence, you're never going to escape the stuff on Urras is way more interesting than the stuff on Annarres.
Like, more important from a plot thing. Right, and like the first half of the book sort of avoids being having too much plot, so it can sort of like sit in the ideas more. But like the second half, like, plot starts happening, and so like some of the ideas they can't spend as much time on.
Yeah. So I think that's fine for not getting into specifics. Do you have anything other general things to say before we dive in big time?
I have not read a lot of sci-fi, but I think this is the best sci-fi book I've ever read.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
A glowing recommendation. I think this book is incredible. All the way through from, at the very least, a like technical writing standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think that its problems that we were talking about are very small in the context of how awesome this book is. It's just that because it's so good, it's sort of like, it's more glaring than it would be in, say, a lesser book.
Man, the only thing I can think of is like, I wish I read this book in like college.
Oh, I know,
because like the stuff like I was thinking about in college, I'm like these books, like, she just like says in a paragraph, I'm like, that's what I was thinking like 5 years ago or whatever. Fuck.
Okay, so for the summary, if I'm not gonna summarize the whole book. I'm just gonna summarize these next things, and I'm gonna do them chronologically. The book tells the story out of order, but I'm going to do what happens on Annarres first and then Urras. So on Annarres, there's a drought or famine, or there's a food shortage. I don't remember exactly why.
Drought equals famine,
right,
equals food shortage.
Right. Thank you, Danilo.
I'm an ecologist.
And so Shevek, being the altruistic guy that he is he's like, hey, fuck all this. I guess also he gets into a big argument with resident physics creep Sabul. And Sabul tells Shevek that essentially they're going to fire him. Then he's like, sorry, you're going to have to find a new fucking job, idiot. And Shevek doesn't know what to do, but he's a good anarchist at heart, and he's gonna go serve his nation, the planet of Urras. Or nope, whoa, the planet
not
of
nation.
No
nation. Whoa,
the moon of Annarres, by doing like the shittiest job of all time, just to help. What is it exactly? I don't have that down. What does he go do? Do you remember, Danilo?
Well, the idea is that like this famine is so bad, and the drought is so bad that like
he's in the desert. He's in
like
the particularly
sort of
bad desert.
Yeah, optional jobs are sort of being waylaid to be like, we need people to work on making food.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was like mining for something. I don't know. It's just like awful and dusty and dry, and they don't have enough rations for like the workers, and people are starving. Yeah, it's bad.
It is bad. And Shevek starts to become disillusioned with Annarres here, thanks to Badap, his friend, because they're called like non-chibi. Is that what they're called? Shevek's friend is a hippie, and he has a hippie commune inside this hippie commune who don't work. And Shevek originally is like,
forces anyone to work,
right? And Shevek is like, oh, these guys are lazy, and then he starts to get to know them, and it's like, oh no, the our world does not value their work. One is a musician, but the syndic of music or syndic of art or whatever it's called hates the art that he makes, and so they make fun of him and stuff. And like, why would you continue to do that if you're constantly being ridiculed? So anyway, after the drought, after the famine, Shevek...
Well, can I say one more thing about the famine? I think I like there's like the tension between like human reactions to things and like the ideals of this, brotherhood on this planet.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I think there's a scene where like a food train breaks down like outside of a starving village, and it's like, are they gonna like raid us? Like, that's not good. But also, like, when you're hungry, like, it's the first time Shevek was actually hungry, and so like everyone sort of has to reckon with what actual hunger means in conflict with like these socialist anarchist ideals of community, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it happens again. He talks to another train driver about that stuff, and the train driver's like, man, this world, man, I don't know, maybe we made a bad move moving here. So after the drought, Shevek and his not wife but life partner,
domestic partnership,
domestic
to get
partner.
A tax break. No, wait, no taxes.
No.
No.
Takver.
Takver.
Yeah, sure, Takver.
Yeah.
They have had a child and have been separated for a long time. Not because they didn't like get imaginary divorced. They just like had to go do. I say imaginary divorce because they're not married. They just had to go do work far away from each other, and so,
honey, I want an imaginary divorce.
They have a kid, which is not really important to the story, but they have 2 kids, and Shevek and Bedap go to a like town hall meeting essentially, and almost jokingly are like, hey, somebody should go to Urras, huh? Hey, somebody should. And
well, is it after they set up their like Department of Initiative?
It is. Oh, it's during a discussion at the Department of Initiative.
Oh, okay.
It's Bedap's. Would you like to describe the Department of Initiative, Danilo, or this?
Yes.
Whatever it is?
So basically, like, Bedap and Shevek and a bunch of the hippie friends are all fed up that Annarres is like run by conformity, because like there aren't any laws, but the big deal is made of like there's a lot of conventions.
Yeah.
And so like there might not be any actual laws that people are enforcing, but it's sort of conventions are enforced by like public opinion and like what other people think of you. And so it's led to all these issues of Shevek can't work on his physics because no one else sees the value in it. And so like people like sort of like shame him for working on it. Same with like Bedap's music and all that stuff. And so they get sick of this, so they make their own syndicate that like is dedicated to shaking things up, basically. So they're the anarchists on the anarchist planet.
Yeah, which is it's hardcore. It's badass, man.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Cool.
And Shevek's mom is there, and she's like,
so they have to go like this Department of Initiative. They don't. It's very weird because you sort of see that, like, whenever people, you can be staunch individualists, but whenever people work together, like,
they will butt
things
heads.
Come up.
Yeah.
Like things will butt heads, and like there will be some sort of structure. So like there's this central council that they have to go to like get permission. Not really permission to do things, but kind of permission,
It's like permission to not be bullied when they do things. Like that's almost what it feels like.
Yeah. Like if they get approval from this council, like that carries some weight, but they don't have any power. Remember, they don't have any power, but they actually do, And Shevek's mom sits on this council.
Yeah, and she is against the idea of anybody going to Urras. And I have this section here. This is a quote from the book to describe how these anarchists argue with each other, which I thought was very funny. To report an Annarres managerial debate in full would be difficult. It went very fast, several people often speaking at once, nobody speaking at great length, a good deal of sarcasm, a great deal left unsaid. The tone emotional, often fiercely personal. An end was reached, yet there was no conclusion. It was like an argument among brothers or among thoughts in an undecided mind. And I like that they describe it as thoughts, like they're arguing it's like arguing with yourself, like in your head, because they all essentially believe the same stuff. It's just how do we enact on those beliefs, which is
and
really good.
They can't force anyone to do anything.
Right.
Like it's very organic, but also a way a lot of corporate meetings work, where no one wants to actually do anything.
When Shevik and Takver and all of our crew, Bedap, and our new best friends are all together, Shevik brings up that he won an award on Urras for physics, which we know already because that's how the book begins. And Shevik makes the decision that, he's going to go. And when he makes this decision, Sabul and his mom and all these people call him a traitor, and Shevik's kid is like getting bullied at the dormitories for their family being traitors. And then now we as the reader know why at the beginning of this book people were throwing rocks at Shevik and trying to kill him. Which is fucked up.
Leave, even though it's like totally, and like part of the meeting was they're not saying they're not gonna let him go. It's will they let him come back?
Yeah.
And, like, there's a whole people like, oh, if he goes and comes back, he's no better than someone from Urras. They're, like, going to kill him. There's, like, a faction that says, like, if you go and come back, like, there's going to be violence. We're telling you that right now.
Yeah.
And that's just, like, a small group. But it's still, like, a threat.
Right.
And it'd be interesting to have a conversation about, because there's no law, like, the role violence and force plays in this.
Yeah, like, what does that look
society?
Like? Have they done that before?
Because it's like it's not condemned because there aren't any laws.
Right.
And so it's very, Also, a lot of the reasons people kill and hurt each other are gone, Like...
Yeah, like...
food. Like, no one's starving.
Right, exactly.
No one's, like, has less than someone else.
And nobody's robbing. There's no, like, robbing or, like, jealousy, because, like, that's not how their society functions.
Yeah.
I guess there is jealousy. We do see it in some of the characters, but there's no, like... There would not be a crime of passion on... Annarres, because there's no, like, they don't really...
There's no possession of other people.
Yeah, there's no monogamy or anything. Okay, so, Urras is a lot more complicated, but I am going to just give bullet points, and then I think we can dive into those bullet points individually.
Sure.
Shevik goes to dinner, and he meets Vea, who is his colleague Oye's sister-in-law?
One of those things.
Is that right? She's incredibly beautiful, and Shevik is smitten with her. They have a day on the town. Maybe we can add this up top. I'll say it clean. Content warning. We're going to talk about sexual assault in this episode because it happens. It happens big time in this section. Shevik, drunkenly attempts to rape Vea.
Mm-hmm. And he's never been drunk before.
Right. He's never.
There's no alcohol on Annarres.
Vea is never in the novel again. Shevik goes back to Iyun, the university.
Mm-hmm.
Shevik gets really mad that everybody has been lying to him the whole time and is just trying to get the research in his head so that they can control everything. He leaves and joins a rebellion. The rebellion fails, ? Shevik leaves Urras. The book ends.
The rebellion fails. Shevik defects to another, like the embassy on another planet.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
The point is, he doesn't have the idea for faster than light travel. He has the idea for instantaneous communication. And his plan is to give that. He's like, hey, embassy that's not on this planet, can you transmit this to everyone so that everyone has this and no one planet can hold it over other people?
Yeah.
And that's like that's like the climax of the book, effectively. And then he goes back home. And then what happens when you get home is an open question because it stops right before they land.
Yeah, which to me is certainly a choice, and
Yes.
I do think it's Le Guin being able to dodge in my opinion, it reads to me like Le Guin did not want to have to wrestle with what that looks like, like a new Annarres looks like, and that's what I was wanting the entire time. Like I really wanted I didn't want like a battle. That's not what I'm saying, but I wanted this like
big fantasy battle. Shevek has a sword.
I wanted them, Annarres as a whole, to like wrestle with this question, not just our main characters. Because Urras would never do that, because it's like a real planet. It's fucking huge. I think there's only 20 million people. I think it's 20 million people in total live on Annarres. So they could essentially talk all to each other. But they don't. That's not what the book is interested in, but I was sort of hoping for that. But when I saw that there was like 40 pages left, I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, because it is sort of, it's an asking questions book.
Yeah.
Not a here are answers book. And sort of like, can Annarres change? What would happen? What's the future of these ideas in a sort of interplanetary way? Like that, I think, would involve a lot of Le Guin coming down on certain things, where I think the strength of this book is the way it gets you to question things about our own society, rather than dealing with like the implications in this sci-fi world.
Yeah. And this book is like a critique on utopia. You're not supposed to come away from this book being like, well, Annarres is good and Urras is bad. Like, that's not... Yeah. I mean, Urras is bad, but you're not supposed to go away with being like Annarres is good. It has its problems, and those problems are interesting. It just... death of the author and all that, but Le Guin doesn't... She doesn't have a thesis on that.
No.
Which is fine, but I was interested in just hearing what her thesis might have been on that, but I am not sure if there's a way to do that without like Shevek and Ketho at the end just sitting down and being like, well, sometimes anarchy is good and sometimes it's bad, and then they give each other a big hug. I don't know how you would go about doing that, but hey,
Though I definitely felt like the end, I was shocked. It's sort of a happy ending.
I know it is. It is.
I was not expecting happy ending here.
No, absolutely not.
So the idea of the end, I mean, we're talking about it now, so we can just talk about it. Is like he's going back and like because he went on his trip and has this information, and has this instantaneous communication that like the relationship between the planets is forever changed. And this guy at the end, the last chapter, he is part of the Hainish planet. He's from Hain. And he like decides to be like, hey, can I join Annarres and be an, Annarresti and a good Odonian and all that stuff? And Shevek's like, I don't know, you kind of have to, they might kill you because like they're really fearful of outsiders like poisoning their utopia. And so he's gonna go off the ship with Shevek and sort of see what happens. Then the book ends.
Yeah.
What do you think happens? I know this is. I don't know if this is too like trite a conversation to have, but I definitely have my idea of like what I think would happen.
Well, I'd like to imagine that, because it's important that I think I forgot to say this too. Shevek gives the instantaneous communication to the Terran embassy, and then they give it to everybody. Mm-hmm. So everybody can use it, not just Urras. And I like to think that like quite literally seizing the means of not production in this case, but communication, and everybody can communicate the same way, is that might be enough to convince like the dissenters on Annarres that, because like I have a hard time thinking that Rulag is gonna kill Shevek when he comes back. And they might let, like, it's important, Ketho as this character, it's incredibly important, and it's only in, like, 3 pages that, like, he's the first
and
guy.
Ketho is the guy on the ship. Yes, that's his name, right.
He's literally an alien. I mean, they're, like, human. He's a gray spaceman, but he's like an alien, and he's going to live on this planet. And it's going to be the first time in over, 160 years that's happened.
Yeah, since the moon of Annarres was settled.
So I like to think that it all works out. That's what
because I think it's the whole, like, from what I see, the point of the book and, like, Shevik's role in it is, like, you know, Annarres has gotten too, like, almost, like, comfortable. And they always talk about how, like, you know, the revolution is a constant process inside everyone's, you know, soul, basically.
Yeah.
And so, like, they sort of have let it settle. And his whole idea is to, like, shake it up a little bit in order to, like, reaffirm what it's actually all about.
Yeah, like,
And so I like to think that, you know, they're challenged and it's uncomfortable, but ultimately, like, it resolves into, like, a greater strength of their ideals.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the ending goes, I think that's sort of all I have to say about that. Maybe we work backwards about that. I think that might be a good way to do this. We can talk about Shevik's joining of the... Is there a name for that movement? Did they come up with a name for that?
No, it's just, I think it's like a general, like, working class revolution.
Yeah, it's the...
This is another thing I wish he made, like, he only meets a poor person, like, when there's 100 pages left of this book.
I know,
Like, I sort of wish it happened earlier. Yeah,
there's and I don't believe, like, Shevik is too... I don't know, he does meet, like, the poorest, saddest man of all time, to be fair to Shevik. His servant, he talks to his servant, and he's like, yeah, man.
In this hotel he's staying at, or whatever.
Yeah, he's like, I've had 8 million dead babies. And Shevik's like, holy shit. And it's like, yeah, I've been to war, like, 8 billion times. It's like, oh my god.
My dad was a janitor.
Yeah.
And he hated it. And Shevik's like, but why would you do something you hate? It's like, it's better than not having any money.
Yeah. And Shevik, after that conversation, leaves and joins. Well, it's after that these conversations he's having over a period of time with his butler. Also,
what's the guy servant butler's name?
Remember, I don't have it written down. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, poor people are very forgettable, so we don't really don't really care about them. The one named poor person in this book.
F4.
Yeah,
F4. EFOR. His name is F4. So F4 takes pity on Shevik. This was a little unclear to me. Like, when he first meets Shevik, it seems like F4 fucking hates him. And then there's a moment where Oye, Shevik's colleague, comes to visit and is like, hey man, you partied real hard last night, didn't you? And then he leaves, and Shevik, like, literally, like, throws his hands up in the air, and he's like, I hate the world, no! And then F4 comes in, and is just like, hey, we're cool now. And I
think it's like, because, like, Shevik is just not part of the system and, like, relating to people in a certain way. And F4 is just so... It's like a capitalism thing where, like, you know, the poorer you are, the lower class you are, the more you have to worry about money, and every interaction and every choice and relationship you have is, like, about money because it's so valuable and it's what's keeping you from, you know, keeping you from surviving.
Right.
And so, like, the fact that Shevik is sort of, like, almost like transcended that, or like his whole people have transcended that. Like, I can sort of see how, like, if your whole life you've been forced to reckon with this, and, like, there's this guy who just, like, doesn't have to worry about it based on how he was born, how you could, like, resent that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. But Shevik,
or like think it's like fake, or think it's like posturing, because you'd have no conception of how anyone could think like that.
Think he's lying or like rubbing it in whenever Shevik is talking to F4.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of especially the back half of this book, the more he interacts with like the Urasti people, one of my favorite parts is like how Le Guin portrays just how deep in the psyche of people the idea of like money and financial transactions how they underlie like human relationships is. Like, I think that's my favorite part of the second half of this book.
It's funny, in the second half of this book, we meet the poor people of Urras, and it, you know, to Shevek it's a shock, but to any reader it's just like, yeah, this is what walking in a city is like this is just what living is like.
It's also like there's comic levels of unemployment. Like it's like 400,000 people are unemployed.
Yeah, people are really rude. Like Shevek is like, hey, how do I get to this street? And people just like walk right by him and are like, fuck you, man.
Well, he tries to buy a piece of like bubble gum at like a stand and gives him like money, and the guy's like super friendly to him, and like Shevek's like, is he only friendly because like he was selling me something? Yeah, you know. So
Shevek escapes the university because when Oye comes to visit him, he conveniently is like, oh yeah, also nobody's allowed to leave anymore. Like, you have to stay here because there's a war.
Because there's a war going on.
There's a vague war that I'm still confused on. So if you feel
it's like a proxy war.
Right.
I think it's
it is
because like
it's the Cold War.
Wrote this like during Vietnam.
Yeah.
So it's like the Soviet Union of this planet, whose name I forget. No, it's called Thu.
Yeah, Thu.
It's like a centralized socialist whatever. They're like backing a rebellion in this other country, like, I don't know, like Afghanistan or Vietnam or something. And then like IO, which is the United States, goes in to like suppress that rebellion. And so it's basically like a proxy war, Cold War thing.
I was just I didn't catch why, like, the war, they make a point of being like, the war is not here, because like there's like a line where Oye, it's very it's not subtle, where Oye is like, we're too civilized to have war in our like first world countries, we have them in the third world countries. But I was just confused why nobody was allowed to leave the university anymore, or is it just Shevek and I'm an idiot and that's like subtext I missed?
I don't remember.
Yeah, and who knows? But anyway, Shevek has to sneak out of the university, which he does with the help of F4, and he meets. He essentially stumbles into a proletariat revolution.
He's like, "Can you take me to this guy?" And everyone's like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yes." Oh, and they're like, "Oh, you're the famous alien guy from the Anarchy planet."
Yeah,
sure, we'll take you to the leader of our revolution.
Yeah, this is where the book for me starts to not fall apart structurally, but where like the problems start to come, because
it just goes really fast.
It does go really fast because like he goes to the city, he talks to like 3 poor people, and is suddenly like printing thousands of copies of revolutionary propaganda. Like that's seriously how fast it happens.
Yeah, and then like the next paragraph, it's like the biggest revolution in the town square, and he's like he's in the middle of a speech.
Yeah,
and it's like a great speech, but it's like, whoa,
it's an amazing speech. But seriously, in the span of like 20 pages, Shevek escapes confinement at the university, joins a rebellion, starts rebelling, everybody in the rebellion dies. Like, it's seriously that fast.
And then he defects, and then he does the thing. Like, yeah, it's like the plot of the whole book happens.
Yeah, he argues with a woman from Earth, because I believe Terra is Earth.
Yeah, it's like literally Earth.
Yeah, there's a character from Terra whose name is not a famous person. It's Einstein. It's not Einstein.
It's not Einstein.
No.
Coincidentally, came up with the same exact theory.
Yes. Yeah, and Einstein's theory of relativity is how Shevek figures out. I was a little confused about that part. I was reading it. I was like, huh? Shevek goes into like a mind trance and figures out everything.
Yeah.
Which is like very beautifully written and wonderfully interesting, but it's one of those moments where I'm like, what is real? What is happening here?
Well, and I think it's like you're supposed to read it, like let it sort of wash over you in the way that it's like he's in this. It all makes sense to him, and you're like it's supposed to feel like you're in it with him. But like, yeah, I don't think it. If you actually tried to make sense of it, it wouldn't, because this thing doesn't exist.
Yeah,
it's science fiction.
So yeah, I mean that's all about that, right? Shevek's revolution goes poorly. The police show up with attack helicopters and kill everybody, and then hunt down the remaining protesters.
He gets stuck in a basement with a guy who like tried to help him or like saved him. he got his like hand shot off.
Yeah.
And then so he's like trying to heal him, and there's like an army outside, and they're trapped in this basement, and then like the guy dies, and then when it's safe, you know, Shevek runs to the embassy. He goes to the Terran embassy, right?
Yes, yeah, he does. Yeah.
And that's when he releases his device, which I believe is called an Ansible.
Yes, it is.
And that apparently is important in the rest of the Hayner cycle books, because it's how all the planets communicate with each other.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to talk about the Vea Shevek stuff next.
That is like the big thing in this book where I'm like, why?
Yeah, that's okay. So I really like that part of the book. It is. The one problem with it is that Shevek never... It's like he never...
He doesn't have to deal with it.
No, he doesn't have to deal with the fact that he, like, raped a woman. Or he didn't.
Or
he tried to sexually assault a woman. But,
And I think the book kept, like, the point of it seems to be... So in the next chapter, he can feel shame for the first time in his life.
Yeah.
But then, like... nothing happens. I also don't quite buy that this is the first time he's felt shame in his life, but...
Well, sure, yeah, because, like... Yeah, I mean, it's the first time we, the reader, has seen it, because we see his life. We don't see... This book is not 8 billion pages long. We don't see every day in this guy's life. But, like, you're right. There's no... In the Annarres chapters, but he does kind of feel ashamed when he wants to, like, take credit for his work over Sable.
Yeah, well, I also find, like, the whole Annarres society is almost based on shame or fear of shame.
Yeah,
because, like, that's how you, like, it's when it's social convention and expectation, like, you know, that's what's, like, the opinion of your fellow people is what is sort of keeping you in line, right? And, like, that's sort of fear of getting shamed, right? I also, like, you know, when he was a kid and they have the prison thing, like when he imprisoned his friend because they thought it'd be fun. Like he talks about how that, like, he was like red and like throwing up and felt sick to his stomach for doing this to another person.
Shame.
And like that's shame, you know?
Yeah. But anyway.
So then the whole Vea thing is like, it sort of shows like he's naive. But also like, it's then like Guin saying that like alcohol's bad. Like I don't really know, you know, like
so he is hanging out with this for all intents and purposes babe all day. And Shevek is like, oh wow, she's really pretty and nice to me. Also,
this is very important, all the Urasti women have their boobs out all the time.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do. And they're all bald.
Yes,
shaved heads. But she and Shevek have this flirty relationship, and they're like going shopping. Very Vin and Elland of them, if you don't mind me saying myself.
No.
No, I'm just joking. But they do go to a party, and Shevek drinks 2 beers and has the most depressing monologue of all time, where he's like, listener, have you ever been to a party? You didn't really want to go there, but like, I don't know, maybe you're the person you were with and you like them, and they're like, hey, wow, we gotta go to this party, right? And you're like, fuck, I go. And then you get like a phone call or like a friend texts you with bad news, and you're like depressed at this party you don't want to be at, but you're still trying to make the most of it. That's what's happening to Shevek. Because Shevek, it's long. It's super long, so we're not gonna read it, but Shevek has this whole thing where he's like, fuck both of our world. I fucking hate everything. It's very good. I like Shevek's monologue here a lot, but it, I mean, you bring up a good point about that. Like, so Shevek, after his monologue, Vea like ushers him away from the party, and they happen
people keep refilling his glass, and he keeps getting more and more drunk, and he doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, because he
doesn't know what being drunk is.
And she ushers him into this bedroom, and they've had this hot and heavy relationship all day, and they like kiss each other, and then Shevek is forcing himself on her, and she keeps saying no, and he ejaculates on her dress. and feels like embarrassed, and then just does he fall? He like throws up everywhere too, and then does he?
Yeah, he throws up and then like falls asleep.
Yeah, he falls asleep, and then Oye and or is it Oye? Two people come.
Oye and his wife. Yeah, they come and take him back.
Yeah,
home.
they come and search his pockets for the theory, and then they take him back home. But when they show up, like, okay, so this is what Thea reacts pretty nonchalantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is supposed to indicate to us that this happens a lot.
Or that she doesn't see Shevek as like a real threat. Like she sees him like a kid.
Yeah,
you know? Like,
that's a good point.
Like that's because I think it's part of this episode like just shows how naive he is, and he doesn't ever that like he's always sort of naive through this book and never has to reckon with that. And so I think this is like Le Guin trying to make him reckon with that, but I don't know if it like works 100%.
Yeah, I think this is like a powerful section, but yeah, it doesn't.
Because like in order to be like, I don't know, like he sort of did it on accident, and if he was like sober, he wouldn't have done it. Because he like knows better,
right? But that, and
so he's like, but then like then that's like a flawless character.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that's not okay. It also doesn't make it okay.
Yeah, the fact that he got really drunk, you know, like the people sort of drugged him. It doesn't make it okay, but like he also didn't know what he was doing, you know?
Right? Yeah.
So it's rough.
And if you think about it, like from his culture, what Shevek was doing is not bad, or is it?
Well, because if someone said no and he was sober, he would have been like, "Oh, okay."
Right, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't.
And that's the only thing I can land on is like, does the Guin think alcohol is bad?
Right.
Like I don't know, you know.
or is it just like is it just like, oh, we're like 3/4 of the way through the book, something scary needs to, like, nothing has happened at all the whole book. Like, this is the first thing where like
this like
shit goes down.
Like,
yeah, I don't know, that's a good,
well, or it's I think maybe it's like, because I think a central like tension of the book is like, you know, human beings have lofty ideals versus like your sort of base animal instincts, and that's sort of like any social system or social economic system has to sort of reckon with that those two things exist. And maybe part of this is showing that like, oh, Shevek has those too. Like if you get drunk, you're gonna do things you can't control because of like, that's just we're but monkeys with big brains, you know. In the sort of the same way of like when people get really hungry, like you can live in an anarchist society, but like you might get all riled up and raid a train because your kid is dying of hunger, you know?
Yeah. I just don't know if, because like there's two, the way I can see it, there's two things. Is that this is either like a mistake, like in the writing of this book. Because the rest of the book wants me to think Shevek is a really good guy, and the fact that he feels shame in the next chapter almost makes it feel like I'm supposed to forgive him, but like I don't. But everybody else is like, Shevek, you're the best, and he starts like a revolution, and he's like this super awesome guy. He just, I don't know, he's a attempted rapist. There's just also this thing, and if it is something I am just supposed to brush off as like a plot point, it does feel pretty distinctly anti-feminist. And there are critics of this book who I don't know if they cite this particular thing, but there are critics who critique this book for having pretty anti-feminist undertones. Or the opposite is true, and I am supposed to be like, oh, Shevek isn't a good guy. But that doesn't really land for me because he's doing all the other stuff I agree with. Like, he does start like a proletariat revolution.
I think part of it is supposed to be like he is like too perfect, and so like when he's like, we need to take this guy down a peg almost.
All right, so I take it back. I said I like that. Remember when I said I like this part? And now we're talking about it. Yeah, I take it back.
Yeah, it just feels very out of place because then it doesn't. You know, I think it's because it doesn't then like deal with implications of what it was and what it brought up.
Right.
I think that's the issue I have a problem with. Like then Is he going to be like? I think he still doesn't know he got drunk. Like what?
And he doesn't know.
People in Annarres drink like fruit juice,
right? Yeah, exactly. For fun. I wished there was like Oye should have been like, hey, what the fuck is your problem? Because I imagine I imagine that rape is still illegal. Like they don't bring that up, but like that's what I would hope.
Or it would have been interesting, like if he, for a minute, like instead of him getting drunk and doing weird stuff to show he's not perfect, like maybe he gets seduced by the idea of like money for a chapter. You know, maybe he like goes on a shopping spree or something, and then like gets and is surrounded by all the stuff, and then feels a bunch of shame because it doesn't actually mean anything to him or something. Like that seems to be on theme rather than this weird scene with Vea.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I wonder how. That's a good point. There's probably a different, not to, rewrite a book, but I imagine a world in which there's a better way to illustrate that point, unless we are totally off the mark
or like totally missing the point.
Yeah,
because I did a little bit of research into it, and like I didn't find any criticism that like talked about this part specifically.
Interesting.
And that's like because it's so. It's so contained to this one chapter.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, then you can like read it and forget about it because it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's not brought up again. Like what? Nobody. Okay, or like when Shevek is leading the revolution, to have her as an anti-revolutionary being like, "Yo, he's a piece of shit." Like he did this,
something like that.
Unless they're totally wrong, but man, I don't know.
But then that makes the book longer, and then, who knows?
That's true. It is already almost 400 pages. But of the Urras stuff, that's sort of it, I think.
Yeah. And if your one flaw with the book is one chapter,
true, it's a pretty good book.
Like, what was that? It's a pretty good book.
Yeah.
It still is a really good book.
So, the Annarres stuff, I find this to be also good, but a lot less interesting to talk about, just for me at least, because it's the problem with like a prequel, like I already know I know that like what's gonna happen, so I'm just sort of like waiting for Shevek to come to the conclusion that he needs to go. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, come on, here we go. But it does do. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I liked the. Like this group feels like disenfranchised in this anarchist thing.
Yeah, I do like that.
And so they decide to like make their own organization, which like is their right as free actors. And I love that as like a solution. And they're like, our whole job is to shake things up. Yeah. And like you can't tell us not to because we can.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of the part becomes a meditation on like family, like what family means in a society where like those relationships aren't like legally binding, because like Bedap has a whole like we get some Bedap POV where he like sort of regrets not settling down because he sees like Shevek comforting his daughter. And like certainly Shevek he sacrifices a lot by like reaffirming his relationship with his family. Like it would have been easier for him to just abandon them and go off and do physics, but like he values them and like stays with them and sacrifices things for them.
Even though like Takver is ugly, like that keeps being that also keeps being brought up. There's like a section where they haven't seen each other for a long time, and the narratorial voice is like, and Shevek really loved her even though she looked like a pile of shit. Like I'm like, what the fuck? I think I see the intention. That's like their love is not skin deep. Like
because they've aged. They've both aged, and he sees that she's aged.
But like Shevek is handsome because he is like
a handsome genius.
Vea's like, you're a handsome genius. Exactly. Yeah. But it is, it does do a good job of Takver and oh my God, what's his daughter's name? They make a whole point about how she has a terrible name, and I can't remember what it is.
Is it Sadiq?
Yeah. That's it. And they have another kid, but that's not. Sadiq is really the important one. But she, when she meets Shevek for the first time, they have this like weird. If you've ever like, it almost feels like Shevek is her stepdad.
Yeah, because when she was like born, and then like the famine happened, and then so they were apart for 4 years. So
Yeah.
she's like meeting her dad for the first time when she's like 4 years old.
And it's very real and very awkward, and they like all hug and cry. It's a really beautiful section. And here we get more stuff about like Shevek is dealing with like they want him back to teach at the university again, but he just thinks it's because they're trying to keep his ideas contained, man.
Yeah.
But we know that that's not gonna work out because fuck you, Sabul. You can't keep our boy down. God damn it, he's gonna give those people that information.
I love what Le Guin is saying with like Sabul, where he's like just the worst.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
And that like, really, you're gonna dedicate your whole life to just being a dick?
Yeah,
on this anarchy
it's
planet.
funny.
Like the fact that like even like those people still exist on the utopian planet. Well, they're just like petty and like mean and like conniving and just slimy. What I think another huge strength of this book is just showing the breadth of, like, accounting for the breadth of humanity in this utopia. Like, they're not all the same. Like, they talk about the people who are like don't want to do any work and then have to go live alone because no one will like feed them because they haven't like earned their keep or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
and that's
I like
like
that
fine.
stuff too.
That's like a social thing. And like, oh, there are still gonna be people who are like bureaucrats.
Right.
Or like there's the section of like where Takver and Shevek are living together and their neighbor like keeps coming over and being like, oh, when you leave, I'm gonna move into this apartment because there's this guy I've been seeing and you guys have a nice view and I really want your view.
It's
And like those people still exist. There's like something, like I think Guin is saying, like there's something in the human psyche that still is like that, like the sort of like the pettiness or the desire to own things, or you know, like everyone has like their favorite blanket, you know, like the emotional attachment to things and, you know, your material conditions. I love that about this book.
Me too.
I did not expect that. I expected to be very like almost straightforward, black and white.
Yeah, well, it's like a 70s science fiction book. Like I don't know, it surprised me. I really like how detailed it is. I was very happy that she wasn't just like the good guys and the bad guys, you know, like Annarres.
She like she understands like people.
Yeah.
And that's like the main.
Yeah, she does.
Like that's a big thing about being a good author, I think, or an author that's gonna not age horribly. It's like someone who understands people.
I don't know if I have a whole lot else to say. That's all that's the Annarres stuff. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. I was wondering what you thought of this idea. It seems like the book is saying something about like how the natural, like our material needs as human beings influences how we interact with other human beings in like society. Because the question that seems to keep coming up is, would Annarres work on a planet with abundant natural resources? Like, part of the reason they all have to band together is because if they don't, they will die.
Right, yeah.
Whereas if, like on Urras, where like there's lush fields and valleys and animals and everything you might need, is that what creates this culture of like possession and nations and hoarding resources and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, I think that is the question, right? Like if everybody's access is limited, then they have to band together or they are going to die. And we see it in the real world of having access to a bunch of shit all the time is like slowly poisoning our society. Maybe replace the ability to like, I mean, still you can just go to a grocery store and buy food, but just the ability to have to be able to communicate like okay, Shevek makes Twitter at the end of this book, let's say. Like,
yeah, he basically makes the internet.
Yeah,
because he's like, anyone can instantaneously communicate with any planet anywhere,
and that
simultaneously.
We know the internet is like a cesspool of human garbage. So from that perspective, like it's hard to, because I don't think innately being around, because like I'm not like that. Like I am surrounded by this world and still hold beliefs similar to Shevek. I don't feel
different. Do you hold the beliefs, or like would it work? You know.
Well, I don't think
like would people do it
in a smaller, like, I don't think, I like to think people would do it, but I mean our world is, you know, people always say people do that dumb thing where they're like, well, have you ever noticed that socialism has never really worked in another country? And it's like conveniently ignoring all of the imperialist intervention in those nations. But I like to imagine in a vacuum, like if we could just have it, like the new American experiment is this. I really like to imagine it would work, but you would run into the same exact problems that they run into in this book of like the shame, like a society built on shame, not laws.
And part of the isolation gets brought up, like the fact that like a nation like this wouldn't work on a planet with other nations, or like even the idea of nations.
Yeah, the idea of nations,
because like
is
then
bad.
You have borders,
right?
And then like this book talks about it too. Like what happens when someone shows up with a gun and starts making people do things. Like the fact that like it sort of has to be on its own planet and isolated. And so I think that the end of the book is the open question is, now that it will sort of no longer be isolated, can it still work?
Not in the way it was working before. No.
Yeah.
I get, and not to answer a question with another question, but was it really working before? But not the way.
Or like, what is the project? Because it brings up like, you know, it can't get rid of capital P pain, but it can get rid of like pains, like optional things. Like no matter what, there's gonna be famine.
Yeah.
But you can set up a society where like the pain of jealousy and envy aren't problems, you know?
Yeah. And I like to imagine that would be the goal of any society. But as soon as, you know, I mean, we see it with that whole nations having borders. I mean, Annarres is a nation for all intents and purposes, and their border just happens to be space, like literal space between or
like
planets.
the wall on the space
port.
port.
That too. Like they think those people are they try to fucking kill Shevek for crossing the picket line. Like it's, I don't know. Annarres has not in the book had not proved themselves to be altruistic enough for me to have complete faith in their like reintegration into a larger, what is it, Tau Ceti? Is that the Cetian in the star system that they're in?
Yeah.
Into a larger society, because they are like, I mean, Urras sucks, but Annarres is incredibly prejudiced against them, and Shevek does make the right decision where he's like, we should probably actually see what's going on over there and not just rely on like our school. Like the only thing they learn in school,
our propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. They have propaganda. So I don't know. How do you feel about that question, Danilo? Answer your own question. How about Jesus Christ?
I don't know. I think the strength of the book is like sort of what it sets out to do, is what Shevek sets out to do, is like tear down the walls. And they end up not being real walls.
Right.
They're like mental walls. And this comes up in the book where it's, you know, oh, we don't have any walls here in Annarres, but like convention has set up walls inside our mind of like what can and can't do.
Well, they do have
can and can't be crossed.
One wall, literal wall. It
yes,
is
they have
literally
one literal wall.
Yeah.
And I think I see Shevek's journey as being breaking down the walls in people's minds with like ideas, and the faster than like communication, it's not faster than like travel. Like people can't go to places instantaneously, but like ideas can spread in real time. Therefore, mental walls can come down, and that's sort of what I see that the book is about. And back to your point about like the internet, like now that we're like 50 years down the road, it feels like this book is like not wholly in the camp of the instantaneous spread of ideas is always a good thing, but it sort of feels like it is positive in that regard, in the way like people were pre-internet. And now it's like, the first thing they're going to be using to send instantaneous travel is it's going to be like alien porn, right?
Yeah, it is. I want to see, it's going to be AI alien porn.
Yeah. It's not like, they're going to be sharing equations and like, why don't you try anarchy? It's like,
it's going to be alt-right internet
video.
memes.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like communication should be free and important, but the book is positing that like that's what it's saying, but it doesn't. That's another thing, though. It doesn't really wrestle with, like, they're like, Urras can't just have it, but by virtue of everybody having it, the terrible capitalist nation also does have it, and will probably, well, not probably, will definitely use it for bad, for evil, similarly to how America uses it. Because I don't know if you know this, but AIO is America. Not subtle.
Did you know the government uses the internet too? The president has a Twitter account.
Well, Joe Biden is on X. Danila, do you find, I don't know if this is anything, but I just thought it was interesting that, or maybe not interesting, it struck my brain that Urasti days are 8 days in a week, 20 hours. They say that.
Oh.
Do you find any significance in that at all, or do you? I just thought like it's almost a pretty direct analog. I was like, why just not 7 days a week, 24 hours? I was like, I wonder why.
I wonder, maybe that's one of those tiny detail things, like Le Guin's like, it's just a construct of how we even set up our days and hours,
Yeah, true.
Because on Annarres, it's called a 10-day, right? Like there's
a
10
decade.
day weeks. Decade, that's right. 10 day is from D&D.
And truly, the land of Faerun and Annarres are pretty similar. To be fair, the Sword Coast and Abernai or whatever.
I think this book just didn't have enough dragons.
This book is, it's very funny because on paper, this book is pretty boring. We talked about this last time, but I was positively riveted the whole time, except for those two moments we talked about.
Because the ideas are good, and it's not preachy. It's not like this is right.
Yeah, it's not.
And I think if you read that, I've read some things on the internet where I think people read it and think it's preachy, and it's like you don't know how ideas work because it's not like she's not.
Well, those people read Atlas Shrugged and be like, "Interesting, what a nuanced take," and it's like you are fucking stupid, man. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean this book is good. I think there's just one more thing I just wanted to read. I thought that this was interesting that in a reprint. A year before she died, in 2017, this book was those like copies of books, the Library of America. When I say that, does that mean anything to you, Danilo? Like
there's those super nice expensive copies with the black covers.
If you don't know, they're the books that like at a bookstore with the black cover and like the stripe in the middle of them. They look really awesome. And this book got I don't know if all the Hainish cycle books did, but this one is a Library of America book.
There's 2 volumes of Le Guin's works, and it's like all her novels and short stories in 2 volumes.
Oh, that's awesome. I might. Interesting.
I just don't like read. I mean, I was gonna get it, but like I don't want to read a novel like inside of a larger book. That feels weird to me. But maybe that's just my own. Maybe that's my wall inside my own mind. Like if I'm reading a book, I want the book to be a separate.
I understand that. Thing. I think I feel the same way. But she said in the Library of America, The Dispossessed started as a very bad short story, which I didn't try to finish, but couldn't quite let go. There was a book in it, and I knew it, but the book had to wait for me to learn what I was writing about and how to write about it. I needed to understand my own passionate opposition to the war that we were, endlessly it seemed, waging in Vietnam and endlessly protesting at home. If I had known then that my country would continue making aggressive wars for the rest of my life, I might have had less energy for protesting that one, but knowing only that I didn't want to study war no more, I studied peace. And then she goes on to talk about the people she read. But I just thought it was, yes, it's about Vietnam and protesting that war. That is essentially what's happening at the end. And I just thought, like, in that quote, it seems very important to her, and in the book, it's like 20 pages. Yeah. I thought that was interesting.
Well, and I think maybe it's part of, like, you know, the ideas. Like, once you start looking for, like, what's the point here, to get down to the core of it, which I think is, like, what are our tendencies as human beings and our human psyche, and how is that tied to, like, our material reality? Because there's a character in this book that, like, he's a font of, like, old-fashioned ideas about, like, war and nations. Yeah. And he's like, our status as a world power is at stake. And Tashevek's like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of like when he tried to read a novel about, or a book about economics, he's like, it was like someone recounting to him a boring and stupid dream. Like, that's sort of what it feels like.
I love that line.
Because as soon as you look at our world with, like, the ideas like borders and nations, it's like, we have to be a world power, and then you're like, what are we talking? Like, if you're thinking about it in the context of, hey, let's make sure every individual human being has a good life, you're like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
You know? And that's sort of like what this book, I think, is trying to instill in people, is to be like, to look at the things that we take for granted and be like, what does this have to do with what's really important in our lives?
It definitely, I don't know, that's what I took from it. I've caught myself thinking about, you know, like, possession and stuff, and not scolding myself like the Annarres people do, but being like, trying to separate the want from the need more in my life. Since we've been reading this book,
and I would like to read a quote that I found, like, I think it's stuff like I'd been thinking about in my life and knocking around in my head, and then she just, like, put it in this paragraph, and I think it's
awesome.
great.
Yeah.
And it's about the idea of, like, earning things or deserving things, and that concept. And so I'll just read that. It was Shevek is at that meeting where he's, like, advocating for. He wants to go to Urras, and, like, some mild-mannered guy on the council speaks up, and he says, what men deserve, for each of us deserve everything, every luxury that was ever piled in the tombs of the dead kings, and each of us deserve nothing, not a mouthful of bread and hunger. Have we not eaten while another starved? Will you punish us for that? Will you reward us for the virtue of starving while others eat? No man earns punishment, no man earns reward. Free your mind of the idea of deserving, the idea of earning, and you will begin to be able to think. And those are from, like, Odo's words.
Yeah, he's quoting the OG anarchist, Odo.
Because I found, once you bring up the idea of earning and deserving things, you can just justify anything.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, that's the problem. Is, like, then you can justify anything.
Yeah. By saying I deserve this, you could destroy the world.
Or they earned this, or I earned this.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Like, you can justify anything.
Yeah. Truly anything. Well, maybe we'll just leave you with this, reader, listener. Le Guin had the foresight to say that she had to wait for her to learn what she was writing about before she wrote it. I think that's a lesson that maybe some of our some people we've read in the past could maybe learn.
She didn't just keep writing 1,000 words a day and then released whatever happened.
And made people pay for, like, a shittier version of it. I
was reading online, and there was, like, a thoughtful review of this book. At the end, it said, based 10 out of 10. And I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, I think this book is incredible. And I'm stunned. I mean, I knew Le Guin was, for all intents and purposes, somebody whose political beliefs I thought I had lined up with, although I had not read a lot of her books, just from what I heard down the grapevine. But I am stunned. There's nothing in this book that's like jumps out. You know, like you'll read books like Heinlein. I don't know if you've ever read Robert Heinlein novels, but
I read Stranger to Strange Land in high school, and that was quite a trip.
Yeah, and like they're just like, I mean, you know, fuck you, Robert Heinlein, but there's, and especially like in moments in those books, it's like, what the
like
fuck?
Gross.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like you're in high school, so you don't know. And I think back, I'm like, why do I feel icky reading this?
Yeah, exactly. But there's nothing like that in this book. And the stuff that is in that book, like the sexual assault, is a discussion point. It's not just like, it just doesn't just happen for happening's sake. At least we don't think. Maybe. I don't know if have we said on this podcast our email? You can send us emails. I don't know if you listen to this.
Yeah,
send
it's
us
in the
email.
description.
Oh yeah,
hardcoverhooligans@gmail.com.
If you have any clue, like if you've
if we missed the boat, please tell us.
Yeah, please do, and we'll talk about it. We're not going to read this book again, but we will talk about it at the end of another episode, or maybe right at the beginning.
We could like say, like, if we get enough feedback, we could like save it all and do like an episode just on where we talk about
that's a good idea.
Feedback on things. Yeah,
but you should read this book if you haven't read it. I think you'd really like it, especially if you listen to this and didn't like Mistborn. I think you'll really like this book. If you're anything like us, I think you'll really like this book.
Next time we will be reading Frank Herbert's Dune.
Oh my God.
A fun touch point on this book and Dune is that I think it has been pointed out that this sort of Annarres is almost a response to Dune, because like Dune sort of asserts that in a area of, or like a planet of super low resources, it would like default to like an authoritarian, totalitarian state, whereas like this sort of refutes that, and like it would holistic sort of collectivist society would work on a place that is sort of devoid of natural resources. Awesome. So I thought that was interesting.
And the outset of this podcast, the idea is that one of us has read the book and the other one has not. But our last adventure through 3 novels destroyed our brains that we both read a book neither of us have read before. When we do Dune, Danilo has read Dune before, and I have not.
Yep.
And hopefully, for the remainder of this podcast, that is the idea going forward. But we'll let you know if that changes.
I have one more thought.
Oh, yeah, please.
I think we should give all the MAGA Trump people a moon that they can all go to.
Yep. And then they can see if their utopia works out. All the
away from all the Pizza Gate Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. These demon rats.
See if that's what's wrong with society.
I thought it was interesting that in this book the libertarians and the socialists band together to hate on the imperialist capitalists, and nowadays if you talk to a libertarian, they're so fucking stupid that they think that like they think that that's like still good. They think that like empire is good and like America is good.
In their mind, they're the imperialists,
right? Yes, yeah. The socialists are the empire. Silly people. But yeah, read this book. Hey, if you are a capitalist, and for whatever reason you're listening to this.
Capitalists don't read books.
No, that's probably true. But
they're too busy managing their land
and buying low and selling high. But yeah, I mean this,
and we mean capitalist in the way, like the actual definition of like those who possess capital.
Yeah,
not like the fact that you like iPhones. Like that's that doesn't make you a capitalist.
Have a house.
If you make a salary. If you are getting paid for your labor, you are not a capitalist.
Right, yes.
You have to make money off of your resources in order to be a capitalist.
And
PSA from Danilo, big pet peeve.
Yeah, I know.
If you are getting paid a salary, you are not a capitalist.
Yeah, if you are deciding your own salary, you are a capitalist.
Based on resources you own and making money off of that without doing anything, then you're a capitalist.
And the next step is like exploiting that labor. Like if you own a bookstore and it's just you trying to run one bookstore, if there is ever a proletariat revolution, I think you're probably fine. That's not really that. You are not the issue. That's not the problem. Sweet. So, see you next time, I suppose. Remember to email us at hardcoverhooligans@gmail.com if you have any fun comments or hate comments. We'll read them. I say that. I guess I'll
read hate. I mean, I'll read hate comments.
Yeah.
We'll read anything.
Yeah, true. We'll read anything, folks. You heard
we
it
read
first.
Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. We will read anything.
We came out of the gate with the worst thing I've ever laid my eyes on, so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get you to like me. So.
Yeah, and if you like the show, please leave a review. Tell your friends.
Yeah.
We're going to keep doing this, so.
Yeah, regardless of whether people are listening, we are going to keep doing it, so.
Because we like doing this.
Believe it or not, Danilo and I like talking to each other, and we will do it without anybody listening, because that's what we were doing before. Before we started.
Now we're just doing it in a microphone, not in a car.
Yeah. We only ever hang out in cars, folks. You heard it here first.